And I've been very, very lucky. I've killed a lot of big deer, 8 Boone and Crockett's now. I've figured out some things that work for habitat and what farms you're looking for.
All right, Bobby Warner. You probably don't know the name, but you need to listen up.
On average, on that 1,500 acres, I'll get $20 a year on camera that are 3.5 and older. I'd say for the average 100-acre piece will get $10 a year on camera. If you owned 15 100-acre tracts, that's $150.
And we talk about the 4 most important things every whitetail farm needs to have.
Number 1 is no secret. We all know you got to go where big bucks are. Number 2, can I keep people off that land?
Hope you guys enjoy this. Here we go.
Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy land. And what land can buy is this: the most incredible experiences in your life.
For anyone listening, you'll have to check out the YouTube version of this. You have a very impressive background there. Some elk, I see a turkey, some whitetails, and you have even more whitetails and elk and mule deer that you can't see in your screen here.
Yeah, I have a little bit of an addiction. So I've over the years, this is my home office, and it's the barn, and it went from a barn to my office, and it's a great place to spend your day.
Yeah, I could. Do you ever catch yourself daydreaming too much in that office and reminiscing of stories and hunts as you look at a deer?
Well, that's why I made it this way. That's the happy space, right? Yeah, daydreaming and hunting certainly gets in the way of work quite often for me.
Yeah. Well, and I think you have a pretty interesting profession. What do you do for work?
So it's I'm an attorney. I actually I grew up in West Virginia. My father was kind of a small town lawyer, and he always kind of steered me towards it, and I liked it because I thought the idea of maybe I could have some flexibility and be able to hunt a lot when I got older, and that didn't really work out. I came out and worked for one of the big firms, and I worked for the insurance companies, and I absolutely hated what I did, because most of these people had very legitimate claims. Oil and gas guys, coal miners hated it. So I flipped sides and I started Warner Law Offices right out of, 2 years out of law school. Everybody thought I was crazy. But it worked out, and it allowed me to do the work I was cared and was passionate about, representing, the working class people and workers of West Virginia. But most importantly, on top of that, it allowed me to block off a lot of time in the spring and fall for hunting. So it was a great profession for me.
When you were growing up, did you know you were going to be an attorney from like kindergarten, or when did you know for sure you were going to do it?
Well, it's funny. I was the youngest of 4, and every teacher and neighbor always joked that to me, but not my siblings. They're like, "You should be a lawyer. You should be a lawyer." And I think I guess I was just kind of a prankster, a BSer, and full of it, I guess you'd say. And so I didn't really even know what that meant to be a lawyer, right? But I think if you keep hearing things over and over, I was naturally drawn to that. I always joke I'm a pretty good lawyer until you bring up the law. So fortunately, I'm surrounded by a lot of very brilliant people at my firm. I think I'm pretty good in front of a jury, and I'm pretty good at telling stories, and which is probably harder to find in the legal world. But you got to surround yourself with people that cover your weaknesses. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense, and I'm sure you have a pile of interesting stories over the years, especially in that subsector of law with oil and gas. I don't watch much TV or anything, but actually caught some of the, I think it's called The Landman, where you kind of see what's going on, and I'm sure it's over dramatized and everything else, but I have a very, very, very tiny idea of maybe what you've dealt with, and maybe that's too much Hollywood, and maybe there's no reality to that too.
I love The Landman, and I think there's a lot of it's a lot more that's accurate than inaccurate from my experience. Yeah.
Okay. Well, very interesting. When did you realize? Obviously, I assume you grew up hunting, and there was probably a time where you said, "I'd really like to own land," because for a lot of folks, even jumping in a time machine to whatever year you ended up buying your first farm, it wasn't as mainstream as it is now. It's still not mainstream in a lot of ways, but when did you realize, man, I think I'm going to work really hard and try to buy some ground?
Well, I was so blessed where I grew up. I grew up at a place called Lake Floyd in West Virginia. Literally, in grade school, I would trap every morning. I would come home. I could hunt grouse, turkeys, deer, you name it, in my backyard, and I could go for miles. Nothing was posted. I was the youngest of four. My dad was amazing as far as getting us involved in the outdoors. So, I mean, being in the outdoors for me was a year-round pursuit. And we used to hunt a piece of property that a friend of his had, and it was 600 acres, and it was unbelievable to have access to this property. We had a little shanty out there. The weekends, just the memories are, to this day, the best memories of my life were growing up hunting in West Virginia. And I remember talking to my dad one time. I was probably like in high school, and I was like, man, I'd really like to own a farm one day. And I remember he was like, well, Bobby, if you bought like 100 acres, that would be like $100,000. That'd be like have another house or another mortgage. And I remember, I still remember that conversation. I was like, oh, I guess that's not realistic. Looking back, I've never dreamed I would be in a position where I would have been able to buy, multiple farms throughout my lifetime. But I always thought that I wanted to be able to do that. I didn't know how realistic it was. And when I got out of college and started my own law firm, for whatever reason, I was pretty good at what I was doing, and had some early successes. And I had, in West Virginia, we have great hunting, phenomenal. We just don't have a lot of huge bucks. And so when I was in law school, I started knocking on doors over in Ohio. And man, I hunted a lot in law school, and it was a different part of Ohio. And then when I moved to southern part of West Virginia to Charleston, I started driving across the highway there, or the state line, and just knocking on doors. And I got permission on back then it was a lot easier. Got on a lot of great farms, killed some great deer. And somewhere along the way, I just started thinking about, gosh, I'd love to own a piece of ground, and met a real character who became a lifelong friend. And through getting access to a piece of property, I heard of a guy that was willing to sell a farm, and that's how it all started.
Really? So what year roughly was this?
Oh gosh, so I got out of law school in 1998. I bought my first farm in 2000, and
Okay.
in first farm in 2000, and it was in kind of southeast Ohio. I had, the year before, I'd killed. The way I got access to this piece of property was I was knocking on doors, and everyone kept saying, well, there's this real nasty swampy area is an amazing piece of ground, but the guy won't let anybody hunt. And I heard that like 5 times. I'm like, I'm going to that guy's house. And I went there, and the guy was, his name is Warren. He was this amazing, brilliant, mad scientist, was a little bit of a hunter, but not much. And he said, well, I'll tell you, come on over, we'll go for a hike. And literally the day I show up, he's like, get in the car. We're going after some ginsenggers. And I was like, next thing you know, I'm literally running through the woods, and he has a machete and a gun and 3 dogs. And we hear the dogs bay something ahead of us. I'm like, I'm about to get in like a gunfight here.
And you're an attorney now.
I was like, this is unbelievable. And the next thing you know, the dogs run off. The dogs had caught the ginsenggers, and that's in Ohio, people steal your ginseng. And they had bayed this person's dogs, but the guy got away. Thank goodness. I don't know what would have happened, but that was my first encounter. And after like 2 days of walking with this guy, he was testing me. He said, well, it was really nice to meet you. I just don't think there's a spot here for you this year. And I go, well, okay, I appreciate it. And I went home, and I'm at home in Charleston, and he calls me a couple days later and says, I was just testing you. There's a real nasty area. You can hunt it this year. You got to be a beagle and walk in front of my brush hog and help me get some lanes mowed in there. And I did it. And that year I killed a 180-inch deer that a lot of the neighbors had been hunting for multiple years, that he was living in there. And I ended up killing that buck. And I own that land now. Years later, I was able to purchase that land. But that was there was a piece that had joined that was the first piece that I actually bought in 2000.
That's fascinating. So going into that conversation where you've heard it It's the guy that doesn't. I mean, to your point, yeah, you want to go where they say no one lets anyone. You're like, yeah, no one hunts that. He doesn't let anyone, and it kind of a contrarian approach. For I'm gonna go talk to that guy. How did you think you were able to win him over?
The Whitetail Podcast is brought to you by Moultrie. One of the first cameras I ever bought was a Moultrie, and they've come a long way. Whether after your first deer ever or this is your 20th year of hunting, Moultrie has you covered. Their cellular trail cameras have no SD card, very easy to use and set up right out of the box. I love to pair the Power Mag with a Pro Series camera. The Moultrie cameras are affordable, effective, and reliable with US-based customer service, 2-year warranty, and just a great camera. So the next time you're in the store and you're trying to decide what camera to buy, I encourage you to try a Moultrie if you want to support the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I was just myself. I mean, I think people want to help people. I really do. I think it's just in people. And if they see a young person and they're trying their best and they're trying to do it the right way and ask permission, and I offered to work and help him, and and I'd have worked for 2 or 3 summers to get access to hunt. I mean, I knew that ground was a really good piece of ground. And I think I still think people think that's not possible. I still think if you go knock on doors, and I had all kinds of little tricks back then. I was really into wildlife photography. So I would approach people and often say, hey, I don't even want to hunt. Would you consider letting me, photograph, wild turkeys the month before the season came in, and just getting to know people and getting to know people in the areas you either want to hunt or maybe buy land. I think is so important, just developing some relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to get an idea because you were a non-resident at that time looking to buy something in that area too. And
Yeah.
so I feel that for a lot of folks that are buying something where they're not from, or they just find a farm online and they're like, oh, that looks like a good farm. And then you don't have any of the undercurrent of that whole entire area. And I think that's a really interesting approach to kind of get a pulse by talking to different folks. And I think you could learn a lot. And I assume you did learn a lot by doing that.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I actually knew the piece that I was going to buy was going to be a real challenge because it sounded like a war over there in gun season. I mean, I can't even describe, like, those days are gone. The amount of hunters and shooting and the deer drives that used to happen in those areas, the guns started and it was like, there couldn't be any deer left, right? They just kept shooting. Still somehow that we had very big deer in that area. But I knew from him that the deer were there, the quality of bucks were there. I also knew in buying this piece of property that was adjacent was a vacant piece of ground. The owner hadn't been on it for 10 or 15 years, and everybody used that property for 4-wheelers and growing dope and all kinds of crazy things. So I knew going into it what I was getting into.
Yeah, and so leading into buying that first farm off market, walk through that process because you're still pretty wet behind the ear here. You're a young man, and you want to buy a farm. What was that whole process from the point of hearing about it and getting it bought?
Yeah, I mean, it was a local dentist that owned the first piece I really wanted to buy that I heard that was on the market. Well, it was a pretty big piece of ground. Certainly for me, it was a big piece of ground. It was 250 acres. Keep in mind, back then, that was 500.
Oh my gosh.
But there was another piece that was critical. Like, you didn't want to buy the 250 if you couldn't get this 100-acre piece beside it. It just wouldn't work the way that people were hunting it and riding 4-wheelers all over it. So I tracked down the guy that had the 100. He was an out of state, and he was a Native American Indian, and his father had gotten that property 30 years before, he said, in gambling in a bar, and he'd never visited the property.
What?
Yeah. So once I knew I could get that one, then I got the other one. So they were both under contract at the same time. And so it was a big, big investment for me. It was a big risk. My wife and I talked about it, but we felt like it was the right move. It was an hour and 15 minutes from our house. So I was going to be able to spend a lot of time on it. And basically, as soon as I got the one locked in, I locked the other one in. And so, in 2000, I came right out of the gates and was very, very fortunate because by buying that, the neighbor had a big block that I already had permission on. So I had, a nice chunk of property right out of the gates. But I knew it was going to be tough. Like I knew I was going to be the jerk out of stater that had come in and now wasn't going to let people hunt. And yeah, there were some interesting, first 3 or 4 years were pretty interesting. Let's just say that.
How did you handle that? Because I imagine there were a lot of awkward, hard conversations and figuring out how you needed to talk to that person. Did you need to be stern and show that, hey, I'm not kidding, or maybe a more friendly approach for someone else? I mean, how did you navigate that?
You get a lot of I've been hunting this for 50 years. My grandpa used to hunt this. And I just took the position of, I'm going to be the nicest neighbor to you. I'm going to be very polite, but there was no, I don't think it can be a gray area. It has to be black and white. You're fortunate you were able to hunt it for all those years, but that's not going to happen anymore. I bought this strictly for hunting. Back then in my mind, I wasn't like, now I really get the investment side of property. Back then, I can't say I was like thinking I was thinking about big bucks, right?
Yeah.
But so I think I tell people now, people ask, when you're looking at land, what's some of the most important things? Security is huge. Human security. In Southeast Ohio, West Virginia, Kentucky, I mean, there's some characters. And you've got to have a game plan. You either have to be able to be on that land a lot, or you have to have someone watch your property. If you're, the joke always is in these regions, if you ain't hunting your property, somebody's hunting your property. And that's true. It just is. So I came in, I put gates up. They got cut several times. We kept putting chains up. I posted the properties. I had a little thing on there, $1,000 leading to the conviction of any trespassers. I actually had to honor that a couple times over the years and paid people. And every time I caught somebody, and it's no fun, I pressed charges. I called the game board.
You would give $1,000 reward if someone reported trespassing.
If they reported and it's on all my sons. If they reported and that person was convicted, it was $1,000 reward. And over 25 years, I only did that twice.
Sure.
But I will tell you, I think that lets people know you're serious. And it was important. Like, you can't be a complete jerk, right? You just have to be like, this is a matter of fact issue. And I think I was always a good person to all the neighbors and all the people in the community, because over time, a lot of the land I bought were from neighbors, people that I developed great relationships. Some of my best friends in the world have been neighbors that surrounded that original farm. So you don't have to be in general a jerk all the time, but I think you got to be pretty matter of fact, because I think it's worse if you're not. I've seen people try to be like, well, I'll let you hunt this, and maybe you can hunt the second season, or I just think that doesn't work out in the long run. And then there's hard feelings. I think it's better just to say, hey, I'll respect your property, you respect mine. And a lot of these people didn't even have property there. They were just coming in and doing deer drives and things like that. And I literally had some physical altercations with people. Fortunately, all those worked out okay. No one was severely injured, but people will test you. And I think if you don't, and I'd like to think people wouldn't have to deal with that now, but I think you have to be prepared for that, and you have to have some confidence in security. We all know how critical it is you need parts of your property that no one ever goes into except that critical 1 or 2 days a year. You can't have people in there coon hunting at night. You can't have people in there, looking for mushrooms and shed hunting. I mean, you've got to make it very clear, like, this property's off limits.
Yeah. And I imagine now it's so much easier with trail cameras and cell cameras to where it keeps people a lot more honest. Would you agree with that? Because even in the early 2000s at that time, I know there were trail cameras, but nothing to like what it is today.
I think definitely trail cameras help. I think you're going to see a trend of security provided by people with drones. And if you think about it, if you're a vacant landowner and somebody for a nominal fee, say the last week of October, the first 2 weeks of November, December, they pull up to your property, they quickly do a grid, and then they've got 10, 15 properties. I think that's going to become where technology is going to go with drones. So I think that's important. I have had people come into our property that know we have obviously 30, 40 cell cameras on the property. They have they're shed hunting and they have the full hoodies on. So, I mean, you still have that. And I have two, I'm very fortunate. I've been very successful, and I count my blessings every single day. I have in that one main block, I have about 1,500 acres, and I have two people that kind of keep an eye. I have a full-time employee, and then I have a neighbor who's kind of a part-time, and he both help me with security when I'm not there, keeping an eye on it. And I still have that. I still occasionally have issues, not very often anymore, but it's something you got to stay on top of for sure.
Yeah, well, I feel like when you have a track that size too, it almost gets a target on its back to where maybe the grass is greener on your farm, and it probably is based off of management and everything. But I think that it almost creates a Area 51 approach where what's going on there? I just want to see what it looks like, and people go in there and check it out, which is a shame, but I think it does create a draw for people that shouldn't be there.
Yeah, there's some of that. There's not much anymore. It's pretty rare. If you have people in and out every day and people walking the lines, and we've always had a very strategic approach. For example, in the gun seasons, we're mainly bow hunt, but we gun hunt some. And so we make sure, for example, spots that we anticipate someone could push the envelope or be on the edges, that's where we hunt, or that's where we take turns patrolling. But I mean, there's got to be some plan in place to protect the property. I've always allowed every place I've ever owned land, I let the game warden hunt the property. I don't think they show you any favoritism, but I mean, people in a small town, they know the vehicles of the game wardens. They know, and that probably is a little bit of a deterrent. We're very lucky in our county. We have a phenomenal game warden. The guy's incredible. And I think he stays awake at night dreaming of catching poachers. So he's phenomenal. He's the best we've ever had, and that's really helpful.
Do you give him a free rein on your farm, or do you say, hey, Mr. Game Warden, these are the bucks that we're after, and you get this stand right next to the road?
Yeah, I'm pretty hard on everybody as far as what they can shoot and where they can hunt. But no, I mean, I generally, people, it'll be like turkey season, like, we hit it pretty hard the first couple of weeks, and then, hey, you can come in after that, or you want to bring someone in and shoot, managing does is always just a constant, trying to get people in there you trust to keep working on your doe population. So that's a great option. Often the game wardens are trying to work with maybe a special needs child, or and we always have management bucks. I think one of the biggest problems that a lot of people face when they're managing these tracks is you can't get anybody to shoot that 5-year-old 7-point. And those are great. So I've always, property can only hold so many big deer. It took me years to figure that out. And you've got to eliminate those big bully bucks, I always call them. And so those game wardens often are looking for opportunities to take somebody, a kid or somewhere. And so I always look for those chances to maybe take out some of those older bucks.
Yeah, one buck state there in Ohio. So you're not going to burn your tag on it. That's interesting. You mentioned you identified this first farm, and I'm curious, what does Bobby's land checklist look like? What are the things that, maybe it's 3 or 4 things that this farm has to have these items for me to be interested?
I've been very fortunate and lucky, worked very hard in my life, and I have had farms in multiple states. I did. It's funny. I'll give you one legal tip to people out there. my main farm is in my name, and I know people can go on Onyx and look at it, and it is what it is. And I don't worry too much because I have such great security and people keeping tabs on it. I now put all my other farms in an LLC. That doesn't imply that it's a hunting farm. And because people do look you up and they want to see where you have farms, but I have farms in other spots. But I get this question a ton, like, well, and I've been very, very lucky. I've killed a lot of big deer, 8 Boone and Crockett's now. So I've figured out some things that work for habitat and what farms you're looking for. But I go with 4 things. And number 1 is no secret. We all know you got to go where big bucks are. And there are bubbles within bubbles. And so I look for those spots. Number 2, every farm I look at, I start with security. And I'm not talking cover. I'm talking security. Can I keep people off that land?
One of the most overlooked pieces of gear when it comes to whitetail hunting is your glass, and that's why I trust Hawk Optics. I've used all sorts of different binoculars over the years, and I truly believe that Hawk dollar for dollar is one of the best options. There's premium glass, a lifetime no-fault warranty, and the Frontier series has been great. I would put it up against any of the glass I've used in the past, and even some more expensive pieces of glass. So if you're ready to upgrade your glass, get a new pair of binoculars, use code WHTL15, or check them out in a retail store and give them a shot. Hawk Optics, vision accomplished.
You know, I hear stories all the time. I had a friend who just bought an amazing place in Kansas for pheasant hunting. Well, he showed up there and there's shotgun shells everywhere and no pheasants. He's like, it's going to be incredible. Well, no, because he's not there and he's not keeping on. He doesn't have a local presence. So I think security is critical. If you're going to live on it or live near it, not an issue. If you're buying property 3 or 4 hours away, make sure either you know someone there or you can pay someone a nominal fee that can swing by 3 or 4 times a week. You got to protect that property. So I think that's really important. As far as the land goes, to me, cover. I think it's so important, and you either have to be able to make that cover or it has the cover. And my favorite piece of ground anywhere is a big, giant, open hardwoods because it's a blank canvas. And I've had some of my greatest farms ever had hardly any deer on them, hardly any big bucks. And within 3 or 4 years, they were phenomenal. And through the timbering process, was able to pay for the food plots, the roads, the clear cuts. I'm a huge fan of 3 to 10 acre clear cuts. Just absolutely love them. And so I'm a big fan of that. And I'd say the fourth, if I'm picking 4 things is don't forget it's still an investment. And you have a duty to yourself, to your family, to your kids. I know we all love big deer, but even if it has giant deer, you never know. I mean, there could be a disease in 20 years that wipe out whitetail deer. We just don't know. Make sure it is a piece of property. If you need to sell it, it's desirable to other people that are non-hunters. It has other uses, either farming, oil and gas, timber. It's a beautiful place to build a subdivision. It's great for a VRBO. Just make sure it's a good piece of property. I mean, if every time you pull up to it, you go, ugh, because there's some really horrible, ugly deterrent, but it's got big bucks, be careful. I know it's tempting, but just make sure it's still a sound investment because it is. I mean, these are huge investments and they can be significant financial. I don't think they're big risks at all because I think it's the greatest investment in the world. But those are the things I'm looking for. Big bucks, I can control it. It's got incredible cover, or I can create incredible cover. And then is it a good investment? Is the price reasonable? I don't worry about price a whole lot if you're a long-term investor. I know everyone's so hung up on it. Like, oh, that seems a little high. It doesn't matter if it's the right piece of property and you're in it for the long haul. You're never going to look back and say, I overpaid. Nobody says that if you have land more than 10 years. It's always the piece of property. Everything I've regretted is the land I've sold and the land I bought or I didn't buy.
Yeah.
And every time the land I didn't buy, I thought the price was too high. I had an opportunity to buy an amazing piece of property that I was leasing a few years ago in Southeast Ohio, and some guy that was an Ivy League educated guy that does some European style timbering came in and he bought it and he paid $3,600 an acre. I thought he was crazy. That was like 2 years ago. That piece of property right now you could easily sell for $5,000 an acre.
Wow.
I mean, and I was like, I thought he was crazy. But so those are the big four that I look at.
Yeah, those are really key pieces of advice, and the security aspect is something that I know we haven't talked about previously, and it's really interesting. Let me ask you this. You mentioned land being, one of the greatest investments in your opinion. You have a lot of smart colleagues. You've talked to a lot of smart people across your career. How often do they say, Bob, you're crazy. Why do you buy all that land? That's stupid. You need to put it in the S&P 500. You need to buy a multifamily, an 80 door multifamily complex, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. Land is dumb. Does that happen, or has that happened? And you just smile and kind of shake your head? No, not now.
People don't say that now. People used to say that.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about this. I grew up, my dad was amazing. I love my father. He's still alive. He still hunts. He's 85 years old. We didn't have a lot of talks about finances. I don't know, he was a kind of a small town lawyer, amazing lawyer, but he didn't ever bought any land. He didn't, we didn't talk about finances. So I didn't really know anything about finances. So when I started making a little bit of money, I just came up with this rule on my own, and it seemed to work well. Every time I had accumulated a little bit of money, or maybe I won a big case and there was some money there, I would put money into three things. I would put 1/3 towards debt, 1/3 in the stock market, and 1/3 in raw land. I just figured that was pretty safe. And it worked out very, very well. For me, it worked out to play out very nicely. I would change that now. I think debt's always important. If it's bad debt, I don't mind borrowing money. I borrow money all the time from my own businesses. So debt doesn't scare me if it's good debt. But I'm just not a huge fan of the stock market anymore. I have a fair amount of money in the market. I'll probably leave that there, but I think throughout the remainder of my life, when I have significant money, or I've found some money, or I'm accumulating, I just think you put it in the land. And the reason I believe that, and I've heard your guests talk about it, but, if you look at the returns, let's just say it's 9-10% a year. In my experience, recreational land is significantly higher in the past 5 or 6 years. So one thing I would say to any younger person is, if you have a job where you can put money into your retirement and they're going to match that 100%, that's a no-brainer. You put in money, they're matching you 100%. I think you do that. I think a Roth IRA for a young person, you do that. But when you get past that, and if you've got to where you can start investing some money, most people use an advisor because they're uncomfortable to invest. First of all, I don't think you need to. If you want to be in the S&P 500, just get a Vanguard no-fee fund. But that 1% or 2% they charge you is an enormous difference over 15 or 20 years. But back to the land, I just think you take that same money and you put it into raw land. I think it's a no-brainer. I mean, first of all, I think it's going to outperform the stock market. And I believe that obviously, and we'll get more into it, but the enjoyment factor of land is priceless.
Yeah.
It's absolutely priceless. Like, I'm 50, I just turned 53, so I'm probably older than a lot of people listening to this. I will tell you something. No matter what anyone will tell you or what you think, when you're younger, you want to just accumulate stuff. I want the fanciest truck and the fanciest house. It's all bullshit. It means nothing. You will learn when you get to be my age, the only thing that matters anymore in life are your relationships and experiences. That's it. That's all that matters. And you can't kind of get there till you've gone through your 20s and 30s and 40s and you hit into 50. That's all that matters. And money can't buy happiness, but it can buy land. And what land can buy is this. the most incredible experiences in your life. Okay, my most beautiful memories of my life are on my properties, on my farms. My kids' first turkeys, their first Pope and young deer, their first deer with a bow, all these incredible memories, even the off season, the shed hunting, the camping, the hanging out the cabin, like those experiences are priceless. And then as far as relationships, you only strengthen your relationships with properties like these. Your relationship with your kids, the time you're sitting there in the blind when they're little and laughing and giggling, and you're out shed hunting, the time they're hanging out with their grandfather, So to me, a lot of people, they want to compare these percentages like, oh, which one's a little bit higher, a little bit lower. You only live this good, one shot at this thing. And if you can make a sound investment, I actually do think it's a better investment. But at the same time, develop experiences and relationships with family and friends. It's a no-brainer. It's not even close. Like, if that's where I think you should be putting your money. And I knew I was going to say that. And I know a lot of people maybe are on the edge of making a big decision that listen to your show. I literally just talked to two financial buddies of mine. I just talked to my accountant. I said, I'm going to say this. Do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm missing something? And everyone were like, no, I think you're totally right.
Wow.
So that's my thought on the investing side. I will tell you this. I have invested in a lot of different things in my life. I have lost money on residential. I started a company building homes in Columbus, Ohio. 2008 hit. Completely lost it there. Lost a lot of money. I have put money into commercial real estate, and I lost money there pretty big. And I know there's people that have just the opposite, tons of success stories. I can only tell you my story. I have put money into 5 or 6 startup businesses. I have one that's doing really well, one that's surviving, the others I completely lost. I have never, ever lost money on raw land. All of it has done a 2x to a 10x return. They've all done extremely well. The only mistakes I've made in land is selling. I had a great farm in Illinois. It was in the Golden Triangle. And I just personally hit a spot where, the work I do as a trial lawyer, you don't get paid by the hour, you get paid on the results. So it's like a roller coaster. And it was just a down cycle, and I needed cash, and I sold that farm, an amazing farm. And I kick myself every day. I wish I had kept that farm. It was, and it was a great investment. Yeah, I mean, the only mistakes I've made on land are the farms, or the farm that I sold. I sold a piece in Colorado I wish I had not sold. Same thing, just needed money for the business. Looking back, like, I thought about that. What could I have done differently? I think you do anything you can, borrow against that property, even consider selling the hunting rights for 2 or 3 years, even if you have to give that up to get a little cash. Maybe someone pays you 3 years on the front end because they, someone that would do it. Do anything you can not to sell that property. I've never sold a piece of property I bought in the state of Ohio, and I'm very happy about that.
Because that's an interesting approach where there's a couple different ways when it comes to accumulating land. One's to, buy, trade up until you get to where you want to go. And then I'm just thinking of farmers and landowners in my area where they sell is not even in the vocabulary. They buy something and then they just keep saving up or pay that farm off, then buy the next one whenever they're ready. Where do you fall in that ideology?
I have made mistakes, and I don't know if they're mistakes, but I do look at buying land differently now after doing it for 25 years. I've probably bought 22 farms over that time period. I would do it differently, and this is how I would do it differently now. When most of the farms I bought were in Southeast Ohio, and when I bought, I just kept adding to, And I've only bought like 20% of my properties ever where there was a real estate agent involved. So they're through relationships and knowing people. And, I used to say, I was taught in the early days, like buying land is a monthly or a yearly cycle. Well, now, as you know, buying land is like a 24-hour cycle now. If it's on the open market, you better hop on it if it's the right piece. But so I tried to build like one glob of property, and I thought the more I could own, there was a lot of benefits to that, and there are some benefits to that. There's also some negatives. If you had and I've quoted like the acreage I have, it's all the same story. It's, do you own 60 acres or do you own 3 20-acre tracts, right? I've been very fortunate, and I have accumulated 1,500 acres. So the question is, am I better off to own 1,500 acres or 15 100-acre farms? 100%, in my opinion, for various reasons, I would say you're better off to own 15 100-acre farms. And let's just start with there's two sides of that. There's the hunting side and there's the financial side. If you look at the hunting side, I wrote down a statistic here. Everybody believes that if you own a bunch of land, you can protect all these deer. And I can tell you, I don't think that's near as accurate as people think. Now, where we are, it's very dense. So owning like 1,500 acres, that's a big block of land. That's like a couple square miles, and it's dense and it's thick and nasty. I've kept detailed records for over the years. I would say our 3 to 4 year old bucks, we only keep 40% of those bucks. 60% get killed. So you think that you're doing all this stuff, and the very, very light pressure, big areas we don't even hunt. And almost every big deer I have, my neighbors, we all share now, they've got those bucks. So they're moving. My 5-year-old bucks, I keep about 60% survival rate. This is assuming we try not to shoot any deer till they're 5. So this is assuming that we didn't kill that deer.
Okay.
60% will carry over. Once you get the 6-year-old plus, it's probably 80%, right? But the bottom line is, even with that much acreage, you're not protecting as many of these. It's not like, oh, they're going to make it to 7, 8, 9.
They're in a vacuum automatically.
They're covering much bigger ground than I think a lot of people realize. Another reason I think multiple tracks, EHD is a real deal, at least in our area. I've had 3 cycles of EHD. I'm in one right now. 2 years ago, I found 24 rack bucks.
Wow.
I didn't have one deer to hunt this year, not one 5-year-old deer to hunt on all that land. And what's interesting is I had friends that have farms, 2 farms over, literally 2 farms over, didn't lose a deer. My farm has a lot of wetlands in it. And so it's standing water and a lot of reclaimed ponds. So I lose, when EHD hits, I get crushed. And then I'm done for 3. I mean, literally, there's no mature deer. So we hunt, we shoot does, we'll take kids out, we have a good time. But there's no mature deer to hunt when that happens. If you had multiple farms in that same county, that would help you. The other reason for multiple farms versus one, I think you lighten the pressure, because one of those farms ends up being like your recreational farm, kids playing, more noise, more 4-wheelers. So I think you protect those properties a little bit better. And there's less pressure on if you have other tracks. So maybe your cabin's on 120 acres and in the other 220 acres, you don't hunt it unless it's absolutely those prime time, 1 or 2 days a year. And that's how you're going to kill that Boone and Crockett or that, 160 plus kind of deer. So the other thing, and I've heard some of your other guests talk about this, but I'll just give you my statistics. And this is on 25 years of data. And again, this is in areas that I would say are like Kentucky, West Virginia, Southeast Ohio. On average, on that 1,500 acres, I'll get 20 bucks a year on camera that are 3.5 and older. That's about average, 20. 70% are residential. The others are bucks that come and go. And that counts even if a deer, if it's a one-time photo. That's about average. I have other tracts and I lease other tracts. I'd say that the average 100-acre piece will get $10 a year on camera. Same statistics. A bunch of them are residential, some are one-timers. So you get 10. So if you just took the stats that I have, if you owned 15 100-acre tracts, that's $150 to hunt.
Yeah.
As opposed to the 20 that I get to hunt, right? Now change the numbers. You can have are you better off to have a 100-acre farm or 520s? 520s.
Yeah.
There's no question. So again, now let me flip over to why I would change it to the multiple tracks from the investment standpoint. And that is, I had a guy call me the other day and offer me a price that was shocking for my property. And everyone says, Mike, and I of course said, no, I'll never sell my farm. And everyone's like, man, that's the best investment you ever made in your life. And it is. It's the best investment I ever made in my life. But here's the problem. When you get to be 53, you start thinking about retiring. Not now, but you think about, what am I going to do at 65 and 70? Where am I going to pay for my lifestyle? Well, when I was younger and I was buying this land, I always thought, well, that'll be my perfect retirement nest egg. I'll just sell the farm when I'm ready to retire. Well, then people get married there and somebody says, oh, that's where I conceived my child, at your cabin. And your bird dog's buried in the backyard and your kids have these incredible, and I couldn't sell that farm for anything. Now I'm so emotionally connected to it. And so I think be careful putting all your eggs in one basket, because I think it makes it really difficult to sell when it's that one block. If I could do it over, I wish I had a third of that with the cabin, and that's our main, we'll call it the home farm. And I wish these other tracts would be throughout the county, one in Kentucky, one in Illinois, one in Iowa, one in Kansas, one in, because then it's like a portfolio.
Yeah.
I think it makes it much more easy to buy and sell those farms. And then for your retirement aspect, you're like, well, when I get to be 65, I'll sell that Kentucky farm. And when I'm 68, I'll sell the Illinois farm. And there's not that you're not going to have those experiences and relationships or experiences. I just think it's a little different than if it's all one block. So I would advise anyone, and again, you don't have to be talking these huge acreages, but I think you're better off to own smaller tracts and have some diversity in them for the reasons I just discussed.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing those stats. That's a really interesting way to illustrate that. I don't recall anyone doing something to where, yeah, you have potentially $150 to hunt, and obviously not all of those are going to live on 100 acres, but you increase your odds exponentially. And then to your point, when it is time to slow down, yeah, the furthest farm away, let's go ahead and sell that one, and then you can retire and utilize that, assuming it's paid for, or you have a bunch of equity and you're going to get a check at closing.
Well, and I think it's like anything. I mean, I've never seen price on land go down anywhere, but different markets, they go up and down, right?
Yeah.
But there's a guy, I can't remember his name, I love. He's like a Wall Street suit and tie guy, and he doesn't talk about raw land ever. And the other day he said something, and I think he's so accurate. Someone said, what's the best investment in America right now? And he said, raw land within 2 hours of a city that is 1 million people or more that is quickly growing.
Mm.
And I've seen that with Columbus, Ohio. Intel moved in there. There's all this money, New York, San Francisco, these people moving in there because of those jobs that are running those data centers. And wow, it's crazy what you see it does to these values. So, it's worked great for me, but what if that wasn't happening? Like maybe if you have some property in Kentucky or some in Illinois or in Iowa, again, if you were in a situation, you could have multiple small farms. It seems to make sense to me that it's just like the stock market. You want to diversify. You don't want one stock. You want a bunch of different stocks. And if you're looking at your land, and selfishly, from hunters, we're like, well, I'll do that early season hunt out in Kansas, and then
Yeah.
I'll do the late season on beans in Iowa or Illinois, or, you know, and then I'll do my rut hunt. I mean, you know, you can manage your whole year. Obviously, you know, I'm a fanatical big game hunter, and spend a lot of time out west. And the beauty out there is the public land's unbelievable. The better hunting is the public land. I've shot 14 bulls with a bow now, and I've never shot one on private. The
Wow.
public land is significantly better. It's hard to get the tags. Whereas it's not, unfortunately, not the same thing with whitetail.
So there's two different questions that come up from what you're describing. You mentioned, you know, your third to debt, third to the market, and third to land. And you said you would probably change that with in the two things I'm trying to illustrate here. The first one being is recreational ground there's no secret, it's exploded in the last 5 or 6 years. And assuming that it's not going to continue to explode, or maybe that growth trajectory becomes a little bit more flat or a little bit more healthy in terms of the market, would you be 1/3 debt, 2/3 land if you were 30 years old right now?
I would be 1/3 debt, 2/3 land.
Yeah.
I just think I just think I truly think it's a better investment if you're looking at the numbers. Secondly, even if it was a wash, I don't think it's a big, you know, people, the big thing, the argument against it used to be, what if you're in a pinch and you need cash? There's a little bit of an argument there, but if you have a farm and you price it right, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone overnight. I mean, it's not like it used to be. You know, I saw a piece come up the other day online, and I've never done this. I can't believe I did this, but it was priced what I thought was below market value. I called the guy on Zillow, and he said, the agent, and he said, I've had like 30 calls today. And he said, we're going to take some offers by tomorrow, and that we're going to close it out. And there's no way I had time to get to look at this property. So, you know, I got on all the apps we do in Google Earth, and it looks like a decent place, and it's priced right. I made a full price cash offer, quick close, and I didn't get it. Somebody else got. I mean, that's the difference.
It's pretty liquid.
You know, in that market we're in right now. So I think the old thing, well, what if you need cash? I'm not saying you can get it the next day, but I think if you price your farm right and you need cash, you probably can get it, you know, within 30 or 45 days. And if it was an emergency, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that argument's a little bit outside of you know, is kind of not as big, as important as it once was. I think the challenge that everyone now faces is just getting the land. You as an agent are in the greatest spot in the world. Like if you get the listing, it's a done deal. My wife's a real estate agent, and she does luxurious big homes, right? If she gets the listing and she prices it right, they're gone like in 24, 48 hours. So the hardest part is for any person, a young person, doesn't matter how old you are, is finding the land. And so I think the biggest challenge is how do you get these properties before they get on the market? Because when they get on the market, you got to have, a lot of young people don't have cash, and they can't take off work a lot of times. And like, you got to go look at that property today, or in the next 3 days. So ideally, you want to try to find property off market. And those are, you know, I always tell people, those are the properties you buy in monthly or yearly cycles. They're relationships, letting people know, hey, if you're ever interested. But you got to get creative. And here's a few tips that I have found is get to know local lawyers in small communities in these whitetail areas. Local lawyers, people that represent people that do divorces, they're often court ordered to sell property. And if they can't, you know, they can provide your name to someone. They can never discuss their cases with you, but they can provide your name. I have been called by multiple attorneys that know that I'm always looking, and they reach out. People that do land deals, lawyers that do a lot of land deals, things fall through all the time, and they might be like, "Hey, I know a person that's looking." That's an option. Timber guys, a lot of them, they're gonna in our area, they'll clear cut a whole place. But if you get ahead of them and say, "Hey, if you come across a piece and you're gonna cut it, maybe we could work somehow. You keep that first, 10 acre. There's a buffer around the perimeter, and then you do your clear cut in the middle." Those. If you're a long term investor, those properties can be bought cheaply, and you keep some clear cuts. You keep some food plots in those clear cuts. They can turn into incredible hunting properties. The leasing thing, that's a great way to potentially get to know the landowner. That's an opportunity. Again, it's just that relationship. You got to be a little creative, maybe approach somebody, maybe an older person that doesn't want to leave their house and, "Hey, would you consider selling the back 80 and you keeping the front 20? I think offering people life estates is something that a lot of people aren't doing. A lot of guys that want to flip land quickly, nothing against them. I have a ton of buddies that do that. They're not offering that. So you know somebody, and if you're a long-term investor, and you maybe knock on their door and talk to them, or someone you get to know over time. And I'm negotiating a deal right now with somebody, and they would get to live there for as long as they live. I have access to improve the property. I have access to hunt it. Super nice lady. I hope she lives a long time. I've known her for many, many years. But she's older, she's up in her upper 70s, and I think it's a good long-term investment, and you typically get those properties much lower than the typical price per acre, because obviously you're giving up something. Someone's going to live on that property. So I think you got to get real creative. I think you definitely got to get real creative. Jake, the other thing, as far as the investment side goes, it's hard to find land. But boy, if you find that piece, what an amazing time to buy long term, because the demand is so high, and it's a different kind of demand. Like when I was young, the only people buying land were the people that wanted to buy it for themselves. Now you have a lot of people buying, improving, flipping property. But the other thing that I can tell you is I have some friends who literally run hedge funds in New York. They're looking to buy large tract. As you know, it's already happening. Look at Blackstone, look at Berkshire Hathaway. They're coming in and they recognize that value. You're starting to see foreign dollars come into the U.S. to buy raw land. So I don't like that. I hate to see that, because it's going to be hard to acquire land. But if you come across the property, or you're thinking is now the right time, it's an amazing time, because I think it's going to grossly outperform the market over the next 5 or 10 years, because the demand is so high and there's so many people looking, way more than there used to be.
Yeah, I think that's all really very fair, very, very fair assumptions based off of the pulse of the market, and those key indicators across the board of a lot of money going into this market that 10 years ago, 15 years ago would have not even considered it. You mentioned something about, going through your life in your 20s and 30s and 40s and upgrading your life, buying the new car, buying the new truck. Did you go through that process? And was there a moment where you're just like, this is stupid? Land and memories is where I'm happiest. So why am I buying these things to impress people I don't really care about?
Yeah, I did a lot of dumb things. I remember as a kid growing up, I had this dream, like, man, if I ever won the lottery, or I ever hit it big, I'm going to buy a Porsche. And I bought a Porsche one time, and that was the dumbest thing I ever did. 2 days later, it was in a hailstorm and destroyed the car, blew out the windows. I think that was a sign from above: don't be an idiot. Yeah, I don't know what it is. And I see it in my own kids that are, they're amazing. My boys are phenomenal hunters and they are obsessed with it. But it's that age, you think you're identified a little bit by what you have, and you think those things will bring you happiness. And you're like, well, once I get this house or once I get this job, you start realizing like that's not what's going to bring you happiness. And, but what brings you happiness are the things you love, right? And the times with your family and friends. And that's why hunting in general is just amazing. I mean, you don't have to own land. You can hunt public or have friends that hunt. I mean, just an incredible thing, but it's the icing on the cake to have that piece of property that you can develop. The other thing that I'll tell you that I've seen is in my life is if I didn't have my farm and my cabin, I believe my father and would have quit hunting years ago, because getting somewhere where he can get in, like you can make farms where they're easier for older people or kids to get in and out. That common place, that meeting ground, the cabin. You know, my dad goes up there in the fall. Most days he doesn't go hunting. Most weekends he doesn't go hunting. And he just likes to be there and see his grandkids and family. And you know, you just can't put values on those things. And so to me, again, back to why I think it's such an incredible investment, it goes far beyond the dollar. But back to your question of, yeah, I wish I had looked some of the things I wasted money on. If I would have taken that same money and put it into a 15 or 20 acre piece of ground, you know, what would that be worth now? Right.
Yeah.
So I think you got to be smart about that. You know, I know a lot of people from listening to your podcast are always thinking like, how can I make it happen? How can I, you know, buy that farm? I do think investing in yourself is the greatest investment. You know, if you're an electrician or you're a lawyer, you're a dentist, you're a contractor. I mean, building your own business is probably the greatest thing you can do. Beyond that, obviously, I've made it clear where I think the best place to put those funds are. But I got a little sidetracked. I'm thinking of 1,000 different things. Right?
We got time. No,
Yeah.
this is great. Yeah. So you think that because you bring up an interesting thing, because someone listening now is like, yeah, this is great, Bobby. I'm not an attorney. I didn't go to law school. I didn't pass the bar exam. I have this job, and you know, my income is never going to be to where it is where your income is at, and took a different career path, and that's what it is. And so I think you're trying to alluding to that as like invest in yourself and figure out a way where you can juice up your income, and maybe instead of wasting your weekends watching football every day or every weekend and every Sunday, like find a way to make some money on Sunday. Is that a fair assumption to kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, but you know, on top of that, I've represented hundreds and hundreds of coal miners, oil and gas. Again, I represent people when they're the injured party, right?
Yep.
And I claim against the coal company, the oil and gas company, the trucking company. So I get to see a lot of people's finances, because when you lose your ability to work, you present a lost wage claim. And to do that, I have to see their information. I can tell you right now, it is shocking. I learned over the years how many coal miners, for example, die or retire as millionaires. I mean, they've consistently put money away. So people do build a lot of contractors, a lot of oil and gas guys. I mean, their retirement, you know, when they hit 65 is a lot of money, right? I'm just saying that they could have taken some just big portions of that same money they were putting away and put it into land. They'd end up in the same exact spot in the end, but they could have had a couple farms or a farm they really loved and enjoyed throughout their career. So most people at some point start putting money away. And again, like I said, I love the Roth IRA. I love any contribution where your employer's matching you. After that, I think you should consider putting money in the land. So I think if you assume most people are going to be able to retire or building a retirement nest egg, I just think you consider that a big portion of that is the land aspect. I'm going to say, I'll tell you another theory I have, and this would be not popular. I'll get 80% of the people on here will say that guy's crazy. First, let me say I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. You know, I got to do the legally. But I have a theory, and this might help some people look at how they buy a piece of property, a young person. I think we were all brainwashed that you had to own a house. It was the greatest investment in the world, was owning a house. I don't know that I agree with that. I have bought multiple homes in my life, and fortunately, I've done well on those homes. But if you're in a market that is growing, is doing well, I think a home investment is a wonderful investment. If you're in a flat market, and there's a lot of flat markets out
A
there.
lot of whitetail country is flat market.
Whitetail country is flat. You look, the nice thing is they don't have the dips, but they don't have the ups and downs. They're pretty flat. Let's just use, and I'm not great with math, but let's just use a couple easy numbers. Let's say somebody's paying $3,000 on a mortgage on a house, but they can find a long-term rental, a 5-year rental for $2,000 a month. Well, you got property on the buy, you got your mortgage, you got your down payment, you got property taxes, right? You got insurance, you got costs to maintain that property, and something always goes wrong. I don't care if it's a new house, an old house. It's like every year something big happens, right? You got these unexpected costs. So figure out those numbers. When you go to start buying houses and you're young, run those projections. Everyone forgets about all those other costs. And run those numbers out for 15 years and see where you are. 10 years, see where you are. And do an estimate on that flat market what that house would be. If you do the opposite, let's say you rent a house for $2,000 a month, right? You avoid most of those other costs. But here's the key. You have to, this doesn't work unless you do this. Those other costs that you would have spent, so I don't know, let's just make it easy and say that the other costs, instead of $3,000, you had like $4,000 a month. Let's just say you saved $2,000. Whatever that true cost is, you have to invest that money. You can't spend it, because most people, when I give them this example, yeah, but I'd probably spend it. You got to set up automatic payments. You got to do something to force it. And either it goes right into an account or it goes right into a land payment. I think a lot of people in flat markets in 10, 15 years would be better off to do that, particularly if it allows them to put the money towards land versus that house in a flat market. Because in these same flat markets, the whitetail properties aren't flat. They're going up.
Yeah.
So
that is fascinating, because I live in a small town, and even when I bought my first house, it was, end of a cul-de-sac, and I was looking at the numbers like, man, this is before COVID still. And I was like, man, I was pulling comps, right? It's like, man, the market does not move. But to your point, I didn't even think about how quickly the raw land market was this hockey sticking over that time frame. That's a really, really interesting way to look at it. Really interesting.
yeah, when I've gone, and there's some people are coming around on that. I kind of like Grant Cardone.
Yep.
And he's been saying that for years, and I was thinking it for years. Sometimes you need someone that's this figure up there to say, and like, yeah, I was thinking
does make sense.
But
Yeah.
I really think there's a lot of truth to that. So I think, again, if you're a younger person and you're trying to think, can I afford that farm? And you're thinking about buying a house, or you bought a house, but you maybe know someone that would do a long-term rental. That's an opportunity for sure. A lot of these, I think we're also going into a point now where a lot of older people would consider owner financing as a form, and you may have to, it's someone you got to know and trust, where they'll sit down and listen to you. When you look at, a lot of them don't want to deal with like a big pop on the tax side. They don't want to, they don't want to move. But the whole idea of owner financing, when you look at, the other thing, think about this, like how many people have an interest rate on something that's 3% now?
A lot. I think
lot.
There's a stat, over half the homes in the United States have either paid off or a rate lower than 4% or something like that.
But they don't want to lose. They don't want to leave it, right?
Yep.
But will they do owner financing, and maybe they're like, hey, give me a deal for 5.5. So they're not losing that. They still have that deal with the bank, but they're able. I think more people are going to start looking at that as an option on homes and on raw land. So,
Mhm.
I think we got to think a little differently too with trying to make these things happen.
That's a really interesting approach. What's one thing that you wish you would have known when you were 25 that you know now? And I'll open this up to professionally, family, land, anything that you wish you would have known now with a few more trips around the sun.
I think I would just, the biggest thing is the one that I already said, and that is everything, every decision that you should make is just understanding that life is about experiences and relationships. And everything, it starts with the foundation is your family. We've heard it, and it couldn't be any more true. The most important decision you ever make is who you marry. Probably has more to do with your happiness or unhappiness. And then that relationship with your kids is the second step of that foundation. Just and then as it carries on, don't be one of these people that works their whole life and says, oh my gosh, you made a bunch of money, and now you're going to start living life and having some trips, and you're physically not able to do stuff. I made a decision many years ago. I think I moved to Colorado 13 years ago, and I split my time. I'm constantly back and forth, but that was a lifestyle decision. I knew I would technically probably make less money because I was going to be not living in the area as much. I was traveling more, but I fell in love with chasing elk and big mule deer in the high country and fly fishing and skiing and mountain biking and all that stuff. And I just made a decision. And not everyone I understand is in that position, but I think you just you gotta do early in life. You got to take some risks. You got to take some chances, but you want to live your life. I can't tell you how many people I see and they're like, well, I'm going to finally do that elk hunt when I'm 65 years old. I'm like, well, it's not going to be the same elk hunt. And if you want to do anything, you can do it. I cannot tell you. I have literally helped 50 people do their first elk hunt on a shoestring, and I've told them how to do it. And they've had sometimes they kill elk, sometimes they don't, but they've had just incredible experiences. And it's the same thing with the land concept. Like, you can do it, figure out a way, get started, buy your first piece, some nasty thicket that's 15 acres and have a ball with it. I made the comment about don't sell land. It depends what your goal is. Like, I agree that as you grow financially, land is a good thing that you can trade up on. Take that profit and now buy your 40 acres. Take that. So it depends what your situation is, but I think you just get started. You learn a lot from the first buy, and you learn a lot from the second buy. And so, I wrote down a quote here that I have on my desk, and I want to make sure I don't get it wrong. And we've heard all the different quotes about land, right? My favorite one is the Will Rogers one that says, "Don't wait to buy land and wait."
Yeah.
Right. And that's the key, is that is kind of the retirement, because you are waiting, right? You understand the value that comes with time, but I've just done so many fun trips in my life where I've ended up on these incredible, someone's cabin or their lake or their property. And I'm like, how in the heck did your family get this? And they're going, my grandpa back in so-and-so bought this place. And I've heard that story 50 times in my life. What story you will never, ever hear is your grandfather was an idiot when he bought this 100 acres 30 years ago. It'll never happen.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. That company that makes land went out of business a long time ago. So what else can you say that for? But yeah, I don't know if I've gotten it across, but I am a massive, I will say this. And this is a plug to you and to anyone that's selling real estate. And a lot of this comes from me seeing bad things on the legal side. Well, I think it's great to try to buy land off market. I think you should always use. I think there's so many advantages to when you're selling land, or even when you're buying it, using an agent. I get the calls when things go bad, and there are a lot of bad things that happen out there, and there's a lot of bad players. Number one, if you're selling your land, I mean, you guys now with the technology you have to first of all, to know how to set that property up where it's got that amazing curb appeal, how it looks nice, and how to promote it with the drone videos and the people you reach overnight. It's unbelievable. So I think it brings a higher price, and there's definitely a couple layers of protection there by, going through a real estate agent. I 100% think a lot of, and I've seen that. I don't know that I appreciated that as much until my wife became a real estate agent. And I've seen from, just the money they'll invest staging a beautiful home, and where I wouldn't even thought to do that, and how that in first impression. And I know you guys in the real estate world, you might go in there and put new gravel and a new gate up, and let's clean this up, and let's get that old metal building out of here. I mean, you guys bring that expertise. Not everyone's great at selling, and you guys are great at selling, right? So there's a reason you guys get the commission, and I know a lot of people struggle with that. But if you're selling a piece of property, in my mind, it is a no-brainer to get that protection, and I do think you guys bring the higher prices.
Yeah. Well, just the network of buyers and everything else, to where this is what we do every day. And a lot of these folks, maybe they sell one property in their entire life. It'd be like me trying to do a root canal myself. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I think I'm going to save 6% on this, so I'm going to do it myself. No way. No way. No way at all. I love that quote. And that's something that I think that a lot of guys get really hung up on, where they just feel like the prices are too high, or they're just not quite ready to make the purchase. And I think something that I have personally experienced when I bought pieces, there's a level of, I do this every day, right? But there's still a level of certainty. I remember specifically working on a deal with a lender that I've worked with and sent a lot of business to. And he called me, he's like, man, am I making the right decision? And I was like, man, when I call you, it'll all work out. No big deal, And so there's a level of uncertainty. And how have you navigated that, to where when you bought pieces, are you like, man, am I paying a little bit too much? Or did you just kind of build a callus towards that? Like, nope, this is the plan. It's going to work out. I see myself being in this farm for 5+ years.
Well, it's interesting. I think early on, I was really always trying to get the best deal. And it was different back then too, because again, the neighbor would reach out and you would say, hey, this is what I think is fair and reasonable. And you didn't have to worry about it, like 5 other people making an offer, and you'd let them think on it for a while. And a month or 2 later, they'd call, and then you'd negotiate a little more. And it was an 8-month deal, right? The only time I think I was ever faced with like paying top dollar is that friend of that I mentioned earlier. He was involved in a business that he got himself in a little bit of a pinch, and he called me up and said, hey, we called it the swamp. And he said, I'm willing to sell the swamp to you. And it was like a dream to have bought it. And he said, I trust you. I want you to, I don't want to call anyone. Just tell me what is top dollar. Because he was like, I'm assuming you would pay top dollar. And he goes, I know we're friends, but I do need top dollar. And I did. I knew what the top dollar I'd heard of was, and I paid that. And now that looks like a steal.
Yeah.
But, I did the right thing, and it hurt a little bit. But looking back, again, I think it's just so different, right? If you're in the business, I'm not the guy to talk to about the quick flip stuff. Ironically, have come to appreciate the value of investing in land so much. I am starting a little side business, and I'm not going to do a lot, but I love the habitat improvement. Love it, love it, love it. I know we haven't talked about that, but that's almost as much fun to me as the hunting. And so as I get older and maybe I start working a little less, I'd like the idea of buying a couple tracks a year and working on them and doing that. I think that's kind of a fascinating thing to get into. But that's the only time that I ever paid like a top dollar that made me uncomfortable. Um, but I guess what I was trying to say is I'm not the guy that can tell you, do you pay top dollar if you're going to sell it in 1 year, 2 year, 3 years? I think you can run the numbers. It's just math, right? You're going to pay this. There's always some cost to improve a property. Always. You've got to do certain things, and then you can run the numbers and then make the projection. Does that make sense? That's just math, right? I'd be very nervous paying top dollar in that situation. Mm-hmm. Because you're now under a lot of pressure. And I don't think right now, if you're buying a piece that's a top dollar piece, I would be very uncomfortable if I had to sell it in 2 or 3 years. I don't think a lot of people understand the cost of property until they get into it, particularly if they're going to improve it. You start looking at getting a guy in there with a chipper and an excavator, things you can't do on your own. Are you going to buy a tractor? They're not cheap. Is it your time, someone else's time? In Ohio, it's shocking, what friends and I pay for corn. I mean, it's absurd. I will tell you, if you're someone looking in these areas that have corn, I'll give you a theory I have. I don't think corn is that important. And everyone says that's crazy. I was brainwashed. Everyone said, well, you got to feed because your neighbors are feeding, right? I don't agree with that anymore. And that took me years. Do I still put out corn? Yeah, I like getting the pictures, but I don't think it's that important. If you look in Ohio or Southeast Ohio, 90% of the woods are wide open now. They didn't used to be, but they're open. And so your neighbors have all these pictures of these bucks. 99% of them they show you are at nighttime. And the bucks, do they kill big bucks on feeders in Ohio? They shoot a lot of 2 and 3 and some 4-year-olds. It's pretty rare. They're shooting 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old bucks. And in our area, there's a lot of 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old deer. Very thick, dense woods. Those deer, I don't ever hunt a feeder because if the picture's there and there's never old bucks there in daylight hours, like, why? It's amazing how many people sit on feeders all the time. So I think if you border a place that's got 300 acres of open hardwoods and they're feeding the heck out of it, but you've got 60 acres and you have perfect habitat and bedding, I don't think you need to feed. And the other thing that everyone forgets about is most people that feed, they're going in and out every week. They're going into the core area, making noise, dumping, coming out. They're like, oh yeah, the deer love it. They run right in. I'm like, yeah, the does and the 2-year-olds and the 1-year, those old bucks I don't care what you're doing. They do not like people. And so I think when you're looking at your costs, don't feel that pressure if you're in Ohio, like I have to feed. Let them feed on your neighbors at night. And are they going to kill some of your young bucks? Yeah, you can't control that anyway.
Yeah.
And those older bucks will figure out where that security and cover is. And you don't have to be in and out of there. You got your 2 or 3 money stands, and when it's prime time and it's right, you slip in there and you kill the deer. They have 200 pictures of.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to do another episode on the habitat and the actual nuts and bolts of your hunting strategy, because I definitely want to dive into that. And I really appreciate your information, your candor, and, maybe I wouldn't say ruffling feathers, because I think what you say, I feel in my heart too, but I feel that we're all trained to think differently. And I appreciate you voicing what you feel is accurate and right in your own endeavors and in your own life.
Yeah, and it's some of that's just even in recent years changed for me. You get something in your head for so long about you need to put all this money and any money you make in the market and land's kind of a side thing. It shouldn't be your primary investment tool. But, like all I can say is I have 25 years of a lot of hard data, and my data, at least in my life, shows that is by far the safest investment and certainly the most enjoyable investment.
Well, one last question. You have 1 year to live and you can only hunt elk or whitetail. Which one are you doing?
Well, I hate to say it, and I think, I grew up as a fanatical turkey hunter, competitive turkey hunter, and I love turkey. But boy, once I started chasing bull elk in archery season, I love whitetail so much in November. But if I had one hunt to do, and I could only do one more, it would be public land backpack hunt, September 19th. Probably New Mexico with a bow and arrow chasing bulls.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much, Bobby. I know when we talked previously, I want to make sure this gets into the episode, but you run a nonprofit as well. If you want to plug that as well.
Oh yeah. So back when my kids were growing up, I just saw a decrease in hunting numbers, and I thought I'd start this little community event, and it kind of grew. It's a nonprofit called Beyond the Backyard. And we've now had 63,000 kids go through it. At any given time, we'll have about 18,000 active members. And it just promotes hunting and fishing. It's just something we did to try to keep kids fired up about the outdoors all year long. It's been a lot of fun. We have a couple of good camps a year. A lot of it's just kind of social media, trying to let parents know of opportunities and things that are coming up. We're based in West Virginia, but we have a lot of West Virginia, high Kentucky, but we probably have 20,000 or 20 states where kids just sign up because it's totally free and their family signs up. And so anywhere you are, you're welcome to basically go to the website and sign your kids up. And then, they're in it when they're 18, we kind of bump them out, but it's been a really fun project that went from a local community thing to a lot bigger than we ever thought it'd be.
No, that's really cool. Well, anything else you want to plug or a way people to get a hold of you if you would like that, but feel free to do so. And I just really appreciate your time here today.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you don't need me
Fair enough.
On the legal side. Our law firm, we represent people all over the United States, is Warner Law Offices. And then I think on Instagram, I think it's just Bobby Warner. I think that's it. And feel free to message me anything about hunting or fishing.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Take care.